200 meters below the surface of the open Pacific, something the size of a fingernail drifts alone in blue water with no bottom in sight and no reef within reach. It is a male greater Argonaut, Argonauta argo, and he is smaller than the eye of almost anything that might decide in the next few seconds that he is a meal. Pressed against his own body, sealed inside a private pouch he has carried since birth, is his third right arm. He has never used it for anything. Within the next few hours, if he is fortunate enough to survive that long, he is going to tear it off his own body and post it, still moving, into the flesh of a female he may only ever touch once. Almost every instinct in the animal kingdom points a male toward keeping his body whole. Here, survival of the bloodline runs in the opposite direction entirely. Success for this animal means voluntarily severing one of his own limbs and delivering it, alive and independently mobile, into a creature roughly 100 times his size. Today, we are going to find out how an 8-centimeter mollusk built one of the strangest handoffs in nature, and how a giant of 19th century French science looked directly at the evidence for this event and got it completely, publicly wrong. Argonauts are not true nautiluses, despite the common name paper nautilus that sailors gave them centuries ago after mistaking their delicate shells for miniature versions of the chambered kind. They are open ocean octopuses, distant cousins of the reef-dwelling species most people picture when they hear the word octopus, but built for a life with no den, no crevice, no floor to retreat to. They drift and jet through tropical and subtropical water across the globe, riding surface currents and sometimes hitching a ride on the bell of a jellyfish, using it as both transport and an opportunistic meal. Females secrete a fragile, ribbed calcium carbonate case around their own bodies, using 2 flattened, web-like arms, a structure they manufacture themselves rather than inherit the way a hermit crab borrows an empty shell. That case can stretch past 30 centimeters and does double duty, cradling tens of thousands of eggs, while also trapping a bubble of surface air that gives her fine control over her depth in open water. Males never build one. For most of this animal's biology, a male barely registers as a factor at all. That absence starts with size, and the gap here is one of the most extreme anywhere in the animal kingdom. A mature female Argonaut can reach a mantle length of 10 centimeters, with a total length, arms extended, of over 40. A mature male tops out at roughly 2 centimeters, sometimes less, not counting the arm he is about to lose. In practical terms, she can outweigh him by a factor running into the hundreds. Picture a house cat attempting to court a killer whale, and you are in roughly the right proportions. This is not a footnote to the story. It is the mechanism the entire story runs on. The first obstacle appears before the two animals ever meet. The open ocean offers no landmarks and no fixed territory to search from. A male Argonaut has no den to defend and no reef edge to patrol, only a few centimeters of soft tissue drifting through a body of water that extends for thousands of kilometers in every direction, searching for one much larger animal that could be anywhere within it. A reef octopus can wait in a burrow and let scent and current bring information to him. A male Argonaut has no burrow and no fixed address at all, only whatever current he happens to be riding at the time. And that current is under no obligation to carry him anywhere near a female. The overwhelming majority of males, by any reasonable estimate, never complete this search. The individuals whose stories continue past this point are the rare ones pulled from a much larger, silent population of failed attempts that leave no trace and no observer. Even a promising trail does not make the crossing safe. The same currents carrying scent and vibration toward a possible mate are patrolled by lancetfish, tuna, and other open water predators, and Argonaut remains have turned up during routine dissections of exactly these species. At 2 centimeters, a male Argonaut is not a meal that requires a hunting strategy. He is a snack that requires nothing more than proximity and bad timing. Every meter he crosses toward a potential mate is a meter crossed in open water, with no cover, no burrow, and no size advantage to fall back on if something larger takes an interest. He cannot outrun a threat built for speed. He can only hope that nothing crosses his path at all. The arm itself has been waiting for this moment since he was a juvenile. Unlike the other 7 arms on his body, this third right arm develops differently from the earliest stages of his short life, growing inside its own membranous sac rather than extending freely the way the rest of his limbs do. For weeks, it sits coiled and unused, a spermatophore already loaded inside it, essentially a single-use cartridge built before he has ever encountered a female to use it on. Biologists studying the wider pattern across cephalopods suspect the arrangement in Argonauts specifically evolved as a way of cutting exposure time to almost nothing. In many reef-dwelling octopus species, a mating male stays physically attached to the female for the entire transfer, sometimes for extended periods. And that proximity carries its own well-documented risk, since females of several octopus species are known to attack and consume a male during or immediately after copulation. An Argonaut male, already outweighed by a margin that would make any prolonged contact a serious gamble, appears to have traded a slower, attached handoff for a fast, self-limiting one. Touch, release, retreat. The entire physical contact between 2 individual Argonauts may last only seconds. Suppose he survives the crossing that gets him there. Suppose, against considerable odds, he detects a female, closes the distance, and finally draws near an animal roughly 20 times his own length. The encounter itself becomes its own gamble. Female cephalopods of many species are not reliably passive toward approaching males, and a size difference this extreme raises the danger further still. Contact with an animal capable of overpowering him instantly, for a reason as mundane as mistaking motion for food, is a real possibility every time a male closes this final gap. He has exactly one advantage in this moment, and it is a narrow one. He does not need to get close enough to be seized. He only needs to get close enough to reach. This is the moment the sealed pouch finally opens. In most cephalopod species, the hectocotylized arm functions as a simple delivery tool, a modified limb that transfers a packet of sperm to the female while staying attached to the male's body throughout, the way a hand remains attached to an arm while it hands someone an object. The Argonaut does something almost no other animal on the planet does with this arm. On contact, he releases it completely. Not bitten off, not torn away by a struggling female, detached, deliberately, by his own body, in a controlled process biologists call autotomy, the same mechanism a lizard uses to drop its tail when a predator grabs it. Except a lizard's severed tail simply thrashes and distracts. This arm has somewhere specific to be. And it does not stop moving once the connection to the male ends. The detached arm continues to use its own line of suckers to grip, pull, and crawl, driven by muscular contractions that do not require a brain issuing fresh commands, working its way progressively deeper into the female's mantle cavity, sometimes for hours after separating from the body that grew it. Researchers attempting to remove a detached arm from inside a female's egg case with forceps have watched it respond to the disturbance, retreating further into the spiral of the shell and clamping down hard with its own suckers, defending territory on behalf of an animal it is, by that point, no longer physically connected to. The male, meanwhile, is finished. Having released a limb that represented a meaningful fraction of his own tiny body mass, he has no second attempt available to him. What follows is rapid decline and death within a short span, a cost already fully paid the instant the arm let go and drifted off on its own. He is, in all likelihood, not even alone in this. Argonauts are occasionally found in loose aggregations, drifting together around the same patch of current or the same raft of floating debris. And mass strandings of empty egg cases along coastlines occur in clusters rather than in isolation, hinting that entire local populations tend to converge and breed within the same narrow windows of time, rather than spreading their efforts evenly across the calendar. That means the male who finally reaches a female may not be approaching an empty field. Other males, drawn by the same currents and the same cues, may be closing in on the identical target at roughly the same time, each of them carrying the same single-use arm, each of them with exactly one attempt available and no way to signal the others off. It would be reasonable to assume surviving that final approach guarantees something for him. It does not. Females are not limited to a single detached arm. Multiple hectocaudae, contributed by multiple different males, have been recovered from inside one female's mantle cavity, some collected over a span of several successive days. She is able to store them and fertilize successive batches of eggs over an extended window, effectively banking genetic material from more than one suitor and deciding, in a way no male ever gets to witness or influence, whose contribution is actually put to use and in what order. The male who survived the open ocean crossing, evaded every predator along the way, and closed that final, dangerous gap may still be only one entrant among several competitors he never meets, his entire reproductive investment folded quietly into a queue he has no way of monitoring. He does not get a vote in the outcome. He does not get to know how the story ends. None of this was understood for most of recorded history. Aristotle described cephalopod mating more than 2,000 years ago, and noted that one arm seemed to play a distinct role in the process, but he doubted a limb could genuinely function as the vehicle for something like sperm, and the observation went nowhere for centuries afterward. The real confusion began in 1829, when the French naturalist Georges Cuvier, among the most respected scientific authorities in Europe and widely credited as a founder of the field of comparative anatomy, examined one of these wriggling, sucker-lined objects recovered from inside a female Argonaut. It moved under its own power. It gripped surfaces with what looked like 100 small cups arranged along its length. Cuvier concluded it was a parasite, an entirely separate organism that happened to be living inside the octopus, and assigned it a new genus built from Greek roots meaning roughly 100-cupped thing. He named it Hectocotylus. He was wrong about what the object actually was. The name stuck regardless, and biologists still use it today across every cephalopod species that produces one. Correcting Cuvier took years, and fittingly, the correction came largely from outside the traditional academic establishment of the time. Jean Villepreux Power, a self-taught naturalist working in Sicily through the 1830s, is widely credited today as the inventor of the modern glass aquarium, which she built specifically so she could observe live Argonauts in captivity, rather than working only from preserved specimens pulled from nets. Her sustained direct observations chipped away at the parasite theory piece by piece over the following years. By 1846, the anatomist Rudolf Kolliker, dissecting the internal structure of the supposed worm alongside his colleague Carl von Siebold, demonstrated it was not an independent organism at all. What he found inside was muscle, connective tissue, and sperm-carrying structures entirely consistent with a modified cephalopod limb. The parasite theory was retired for good. The name it had been given, oddly, was not, and endures in the scientific literature to this day. There is a common assumption worth clearing up here, because it quietly shapes how most people picture this entire event before they even hear the details. Many people assume the male Argonaut is somehow forced into this exchange, overpowered by a much larger female who tears the arm from his body against his will, in keeping with other cephalopod mating stories that end with the male being eaten mid-encounter. That is not what is actually happening in this particular case. The detachment here is not an assault carried out against him. It is closer to a mechanism built directly into the male's own body, one that fires automatically the moment sustained contact is made. He is the one releasing it. The female is not attacking him to obtain it, and in most observed cases, she shows little interest in him at all once contact ends. In a strange way, this exchange resembles a delivery system far more than it resembles a fight, one that simply happens to cost the courier his life, regardless of how smoothly the delivery goes. The female's side of this arrangement is not without its own cost, even if it is a cost measured on a different scale. Building and maintaining that egg case draws heavily on her own energy reserves, at the exact time she is also feeding, growing, and staying alert to the same open-water predators that have been picking off males throughout this entire story. She is larger and better defended than a male by orders of magnitude, but she is not invulnerable, and a fully grown Argonaut still represents a worthwhile meal to something big enough to take her. By the time she is ready to release her young, she may be carrying tens of thousands of embryos inside a single egg case, with some documented clutches numbered in the range of 48,000 individuals. She herself is far from finished at this point. Unlike the male, whose entire reproductive output is spent in one encounter and one arm, the female is capable of reproducing more than once across her lifetime, continuing to grow, continuing to hunt small drifting mollusks and crustaceans near the surface, continuing to ride the open ocean currents inside the paper-thin case she built with her own arms. Along certain coastlines, in the closing months of the breeding season, between roughly April and August, beachgoers occasionally find dozens of these abandoned egg cases washed ashore together within a matter of days. A quiet, physical signature of an entire season's worth of these encounters finally running their course out at sea, unseen by anyone until the evidence arrives on the sand. Strip away everything strange about the mechanics, and what remains is one of the more efficient reproductive economies documented anywhere in the animal kingdom. A male built almost entirely around one task, locating a single target and delivering a single payload, at the total cost of his own survival, competing the entire time against other males he will never meet, judged by a female he will very likely never encounter again in whatever life he has left. No return trip, no shared investment, no second chance if the first attempt fails. Just a small, temporary body doing the one job it was constructed for, and an arm that keeps working, gripping, and crawling for hours after the animal that grew it has already stopped counting the minutes. 2 centuries after Cuvier first held one of these arms in his hand and confidently declared it a worm, the animal that produced it remains one of the least observed large predators of the open ocean, more often known from a stomach content record or a shell washed up on a beach than from a direct sighting in the wild. There is no tracking collar small enough for an animal this size. No way to follow one particular male from the moment he leaves his hatching site to the moment, hours or days later, when a single arm keeps moving inside a shell that will outlast him by months. What survives of him afterward is not a memory or a return migration, or a share of parental duty. It is a few grams of muscle and sperm, still working, long after the rest of him has already been spent. Somewhere in warm open water at this very moment, another male Argonaut, a few centimeters of that same soft, determined tissue, is drifting through miles of empty blue, searching for a shape roughly 100 times his own size, carrying the only thing he has to offer sealed tightly against his own body, waiting for the instant he will finally have to let it go.